In a world where tensions between the United States and China continue to grow, many countries are being forced to pick sides. But there is one tiny nation that refuses to play the game: Singapore. And leading this voice of reason is Kishore Mahbubani, a former diplomat, respected scholar, and someone who understands the power dynamics of both East and West better than most. So, why does he believe Singapore will never choose between China and the US? Singapore may be small in size, but its voice carries weight. It's one of Asia's most successful economies. It's clean, modern, efficient, a modern city state. But what makes Singapore truly unique is where it stands, not just on the map, but on the global stage. Geographically, it sits at the heart of Southeast Asia, a key trade hub connecting the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. Politically, it walks a tightrope between two global giants, the US and China. So, how does a small country manage a difficult balancing act? The answer lies partly in history and partly in smart leadership. Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, set the tone early on. He did not just govern, he laid down a philosophy, a long term strategy rooted in one powerful idea: neutrality. After Singapore gained independence in 1965, it was a tiny island nation with no natural resources, a small military, and surrounded by much larger neighbors: Malaysia, Indonesia, and further out, the giants like China and the United States. Lee Kuan Yew understood this reality well. He realized that choosing sides in a world dominated by Cold War politics could spell disaster. Instead of aligning Singapore strictly with the West or East, Lee welcomed investments and partnerships from all directions. In the 1970s and 80s, while many newly independent countries leaned heavily toward either the US or the Soviet Union, Singapore walked a different path. It hosted American military ships while also opening the door to Chinese and Soviet diplomatic relations. Lee once said, "We are a small country. We cannot afford to make enemies." That meant Singapore had to be pragmatic, not ideological. Kishore, who served as Singapore's ambassador to the UN and worked under Lee's leadership, continues to echo that wisdom today. He explained if Singapore ever openly takes sides, especially in the growing contest between China and the US, it could lose the trust of one side, or worse, become a pawn in their larger game. Think about it. Singapore's economy thrives on global trade, foreign investment, and multilateralism. In 2023, the US was Singapore's largest foreign direct investor, while China remained its top trading partner. Why would any smart nation want to jeopardize either relationship? Let me ask you this. If you were a small country surrounded by powerful interests, would you risk alienating either one? Kishore would not, and Singapore never has. Even during tense moments like the US China trade war, Singapore carefully avoided taking sides. While American warships docked in Singapore, Chinese officials were notified in advance. When Singapore signed deals with China, America was kept in the loop. And during the Russia Ukraine war, Singapore was the only Southeast Asian nation to impose sanctions on Russia. A bold move, but framed not as a geopolitical alignment, but as a principled stance against quote unquote aggression. This careful balancing act is what has kept Singapore safe, respected, and prosperous. While others swing from side to side, Singapore stays steady. So, again, if you were in Singapore's shoes, what would you do? Would you play favorites, or would you, like Lee Kuan Yew, build trust with all and stay above the fray? Singapore has chosen the latter, and it's worked. Kishore often says that Singapore is guided not by ideology, but by pragmatism. But what does that really mean? It means Singapore does not see the world in black and white. It doesn't blindly pick sides in global conflicts. Instead of asking who's right and who's wrong, Singapore asks the more grounded question: what's best for Singapore's long term survival and prosperity? That mindset has shaped almost every major foreign policy decision the country has made. Take its relationship with the United States. Singapore is home to a key U.S. naval logistics facility used by the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet. It's a sign of deep military cooperation, one that gives the US a strategic presence in the region and gives Singapore a powerful layer of security without needing to build a massive military of its own, even though Singapore is not threatened militarily by any power. Singapore also buys American military equipment, such as F 15 fighter jets, and participates in joint training exercises with the US forces. American tech firms, banks, and universities are well established in Singapore. At the same time, Singapore has built strong, steady ties with China. It was one of the first ASEAN countries to support China's BRI, a massive infrastructure and trade projects linking Asia, Africa, and Europe. Singaporean companies are active in BRI projects, especially in logistics, finance, and digital connectivity. In Chongqing, China, Singapore is a lead partner in the China Singapore Connectivity Initiative, which improves transport, finance, and digital services between China's western regions and Southeast Asia. It's a win win, boosting China's western development while positioning Singapore as a regional hub. Singapore also supports Chinese language and culture, with a significant portion of its population being of Chinese descent. It encourages students to learn Mandarin, and it maintains close cultural ties to Beijing, while still keeping English as the working language and maintaining openness to Western ideas and values. To outsiders, this might seem confusing. How can one country cooperate with two powers that are so often at odds? But as Kishore puts it, choosing is a Western obsession. In Asia, we engage both. This isn't fence sitting, it's a carefully calculated long term strategy. Just look at the numbers. In 2022, China was Singapore's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade exceeding $115 billion. The US was the largest source of direct foreign investment, contributing over $300 billion in assets held by American companies. Both relationships are essential. Singapore cannot afford to lose either. Would you expect a small nation with no natural resources, dependent on trade and global stability, to gamble everything on ideological loyalty? Singapore's answer has always been no. And so far, that answer has served it well. We're no longer in the Cold War. Today, the world is multipolar, fast changing, and deeply connected. And Singapore understands that better than most. Kishore often points out that the 21st century will be the Asian century, and China will be at the center of it. But that doesn't mean it's finished. Far from it. America's influence in technology, defense, and global finance remains strong. So, how does Singapore navigate this reality? It doesn't resist change, it adapts. It invests in both relationships, it avoids making enemies, and it speaks with a voice of calm, even when others raise theirs in anger. In this sense, Kishore is not just defending Singapore's foreign policy, he's offering the world a different way to think about power. What can other nations learn from Singapore? In a time when smaller countries feel pressure to pick sides, Singapore's model shows that it's possible to stay neutral, not by hiding, but by being smart. Kishore urges ASEAN countries long term to focus on regional stability and to build bridges instead of walls. He believes this is not only possible but necessary. After all, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, and no one wants to be the grass. So, why will Singapore never choose between China and the United States? Because it doesn't have to. because it believes in balance, in dialogue, and working with everyone, not against anyone. And as Kishore puts it, Singapore has a voice of reason in a time of division. In a world where two countries are pushed to take sides, maybe the smartest thing is not to. And maybe, just maybe, the rest of us should listen.